Hey everyone, welcome to the Tom's Hardware Podcast for September 27th, 2022. As always, I'm Tom's Hardware Editor-in-Chief Avram Pelch, and I'm joined by Associate Editor Les Pounder and Ash Hill, who's normally with us, should be on any minute. She had to reboot her PC. Today we don't have a great special guest, but we got a lot to talk about, a lot of cool things that are going on with our Pis. Hopefully we can learn something, and of course maybe you and the live audience have things that you could teach us. I want to talk specifically about great new it's more new to me, but about a great new 3D printing system that I'm using on my Pi, and about some tools that I'm using to do server testing. I also Les is going to talk about a new banana Pi, and Ash is going to talk about some amazing projects that are out there. So welcome, Ash. I guess let's get started with the banana.
Of course.
Yep. There is a banana Pi out there that is trying to take down the Pico.
It is, yeah, and I can make some banana jokes now about it's going to split the community. That'd be a really bad one. But I won't. I also haven't got a banana for scale, unfortunately, so I can't do that joke either. Banana Pi, they've been around for quite a while, sort of one of the competitors to Raspberry Pi, just like Orange Pis as well. Fruit and pastry go together quite well, apparently. So, Banana Pi, Pico, we'll just get the name of it again. The Pico WS3 is the full name of this. Now, it's an unusual one, so it has the form factor of a Pico and a Pico W. But it hasn't got an RP2040 inside of it. It's actually got an ESP32S3, which I believe is the dual-core variant of the ESP32 chip. So ESP32 has been around years now. I think 2016 is when it came out, roughly. Awesome board. Really powerful. I've got a few in the bits box behind me. Cheap, cheerful, gets the job done, works with MicroPython, works with CircuitPython to a degree. And this version shares pretty much the same form factor. So I'm going to show you a pinout as well for this. Here we go. So here is the pinout. On the left-hand side is the Pico W ESP32 from Banana Pi. On the right is just a plain old Raspberry Pi Pico. That's taken from pico.pinout.xyz. That's Phil from Pimaroni Gadgetoid, his website. A great resource. Tells you all the pin mappings you need to know. A quick glance, and the pin numbers match, the functions match, and looking at the schematics underneath, they match as well, pretty much. I think there's 2 millimeters difference in the overall length between 2 points on the board, but it should be the same pin size, so it should all work.
Well, what would you say is its greatest appeal?
Badumtish. I would say it's the ease of use of the ESP32 ecosystem, because we've had MicroPython on that now for years, and it just works really well. And also the flexibility. So you've got quite a powerful processor. So the ESP32's got an extensor 32-bit dual-core CPU, 240 megahertz, which doesn't sound a lot really in the world of gigahertz CPUs, but it's enough for a microcontroller. Dual core of that, it's got plenty of RAM as well. It's got 320 kilobytes of SRAM, which is more than the Raspberry Pi Pico W. And it's got a bit of space as well to store your programs. Let me just check. I believe it's 2 meg you've got. Yeah, 2 meg. No, sorry, 8 meg actually. SRAM. Oh, wow. Yeah, there we go, 8 meg. So you've got plenty of space to store your projects. It's also got built-in LiPo charging, which is 500 milliamp hours. It charges that. I'll just double check that. I've got the spec sheet in front of me. Can't find it now. It's eluding me. But it has got onboard charging, which is a nice feature to have.
Yeah.
And it also comes with a USB-C connection, which I do like as well. So price of this is approximately, the exchange rates in the UK and US are going really wild at the minute, but it's about $6 for this board.
That's
But
not too bad.
It's not bad. I mean, it's more than a Pico W, but the problem we've got here is it's getting the delivery. It's about $7 to get it delivered. Ooh. So it's more than what the board is. But I'm
can you get a bunch and save on it?
The banana jokes are going to kill us tonight, aren't they? Better not slip up. I reckon you could buy a bunch and save a lot. But I'm going to get one to have a play and see what it's like. ESP32, as I say, has been around for ages, and it's a really good little board. So to compare it against the Pico W would be very interesting, especially the pinouts. Now, it doesn't mention on the pinouts anything about I2C or I2C, however you pronounce it, or IIC. Doesn't mention anything at all, but looking in the datasheet, it says that the GPIO can be configured. So you can set which pins are your data and clock pins for I2C. So you could have some level of compatibility with Pico W add-ons and Pico add-ons, like the old packs and displays that you can get from Pimoroni. So I'm going to play with that when I get one and see what it's all about. But yeah, I'm interested in it.
Do you know if there's any restrictions on how many you could buy at once, or does the price change if you try to get more than one, anything like that? Because I know the Raspberry Pi's done that.
The price won't change. This is AliExpress it's on. So what will happen is the postage costs will change due to different laws and taxation. So customs duties will be required on it, that sort of thing. So buying one would be the cheapest option, obviously, but then buying multiples, it would change the postage and customs based on how many you're buying. I think if you're buying in bulk, you might be a reseller, for example.
Gotcha. That also makes it a little bit of, well, I'm not trying to do another banana pun, but that is a little bit more appealing because you can get, let's say you're a student or rather a teacher and you want to buy several for your students, that can be a little more cost effective. And you can use similar programming languages that you'd be learning on the Pico.
Well, I say you're using MicroPython, which is pretty much the same as what's on the Raspberry Pi Pico.
Yeah.
You just got access straight away to Wi-Fi and Bluetooth straight away. I'm going to worry about that. I mean, you've got Bluetooth for the ESP32 ready to go. Whereas on the Pico W, we haven't got that yet. Now, there are rumblings that it's going to come in the future. When? We don't know. We'd like it to be sooner rather than later because Bluetooth would be a really cool feature for messing around with robots on a Pico W. But we'll have to wait and see for that one. But in the meantime, you've got ESP32s doing the rounds and ESP8266s that are really cheap now. So you can get hacking around with those and make some really cool projects.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we know if if this will work with CircuitPython?
There'll probably be some level of compatibility because ESP32s are compatible with CircuitPython. In fact, we got circuitpython.org now and do a very quick search for ESP32. I know Adafruit have their own board, which is is it an S3 or an S2? It's an S2, I think. Oh no, do support unexpected makers, Feather S3, so there's a possibility. So there probably is some level of compatibility, but your mileage may vary on it.
Yep. Well, yeah, I mean, you don't want to. What can you do? So, speaking of neat things to experiment with, if you are lucky enough to have a Pi or two around, and you don't have to go and try and find one because it's been difficult, as we covered last week with the inventor of RPI Locator. There's a couple of really neat things that you can do with it that I've been doing in the last week that I wanted to share with folks. So one of them is using an alternate system for my 3D printer called Clipper. So for folks who have 3D printers, and I think a lot of people who have Pis have 3D printers, we know that it's not news that Octopi is one of the great benefits of having a Pi. With Octopi, you plug. We've covered this before, but quick refresher: with Octopi, you install the Octopi software on your Raspberry Pi. You can do it. Here, I'll share my screen for a sec. You can do it with. You can do it with the. So here's a page, right? So you can do it with the, right here when you choose OS. Octopi is actually, I think, is that on other? It's on here.
So it is integrated with the imager now. That's neat. It's been a while since I've set one
I
up.
think it's integrated with the imager, although now that I'm
It's the
looking
specifics
for it,
ones now. You've got
other specific purpose OS, maybe?
yeah.
3D printing. Okay. Here we go. All right.
Ah.
Also, alternatives to Octopi include, oh, look, Octo Clipper Pi. You could just get it right with the Clipper content already in it. So you use Octopi, great. Octopi is a wonderful system that allows you to do lots of cool stuff via a web interface. It hooks into the USB port on your printer and gives you all kinds of great stuff. But Clipper is something that is an alternative firmware that operates on top of Raspberry Pi that that you can use to speed up your 3D prints. So why that matters? Imagine for a second how fast or slow your 3D printer actually is. Most 3D printers, FDM printers, print at about 50 to 60 millimeters a second. And if you go above that, much above that, you start to see all kinds of crazy stuff happening, like what they call ringing, which is like ghosting on the model, or it just like whacks into stuff. It has lots of problems. Clipper is an alternate firmware. You install the tiny piece of firmware on the printer. It replaces the printer's existing firmware, which is usually Marlin firmware, and you do all of the control of the printer, not through the touch screen. That's pretty much gone. I mean, I think there's some add-ons that you could get to bring it back, but you do it through Octopi, and or through another package platform like Mainsail. And what you want to do is it gives you the ability to massively speed up your prints. So now it requires quite a bit of work and quite a bit of tuning, but which I'm still in the middle of. But let me get into the details a little bit. So one thing you want to do, and here's the main page for Clipper. There's some instruction. There's a lot of documentation here. So if you already have Octopi on a Raspberry Pi, you can install the Clipper system onto it, and then you can install a Clipper plugin. So what it ends up looking like is, if you go to my Octopi.
That's a strong password.
Yeah, really strong. So anyway, new Octopi. Okay, later. So you end up with this like field here that shows you your Octopi, but you see everything going on the terminal. And what you otherwise you can kind of use this as you regularly would, but the really key element here is the printer.config file. So if you look at, let's say, I'm here looking at my printer config, right? Which is on, this is on the Raspberry Pi that's hooked up to my printer. There's all of these little things you need to tweak. The best thing is to try and find an example printer config for your printer. I fortunately found one for my Elegoo Neptune 3 that one person is working on, but you still have to make tweaks, and then you can tweak it as needed. You can go through a process for bed leveling and temperature calibration, and then you can tweak it with something called input shaping. So what input shaping does is, and this is otherwise known as resonance compensation, right? Is it allows you to so like here you would see like a test print, or here's a bench sheet where you have all these, like you should just have these circular holes, but instead you have all these echoes of them called rings. what you want to do is figure out what the ringing frequency is. You can do this either by printing the test print and measuring the rings, or a better way is to get an accelerometer, which you attach to your Raspberry Pi and you run a couple of scripts. You attach the accelerometer very directly to the print head and then to the bed, and then you get some numbers which you plug into a formula, and that allows you Clipper to compensate for the vibration that your printer is making while it's going at these faster speeds.
That is cool.
And what that should allow it to do is you to be able to print at maybe 3 or 4 times the speed that you could have with the same 3D printer that you have now. So you should be able to go from like 50 to 150 to, I've seen some folks say that they went up to like 400 or 500. I think it's going to really depend on the printer. I apologize for using Windows.
It's fine.
It's a convenience because so much stuff I test is in Windows, but I do love using Linux, and I do obviously enjoy using it a lot on lots of remote systems like my Pi. So anyway, the point is, you can then get it to where your system will compensate for that, and now you can run at 150 at 3 or 4 times the speed. Now, interesting little note: if you haven't heard of Clipper before and it's been around a couple of years, it's going mainstream now. And by that, what I mean is Clipper is now coming preloaded as the default firmware on some printers. So we are soon going to publish our review of the FL Sun V200 printer, which comes with Clipper on it. That's the only firmware it has. It has a UI, which me installing Clipper on my Raspberry Pi don't have a UI on my printer anymore. The screen is useless. But FL Sun has something. Creality just came out with last week something that it calls a Sonic Pad, which runs Clipper on it, and you plug it into. You can either plug it into a Creality printer or another printer, but it's tuned already for the Creality ones, and it'll run Clipper and it'll get them to be faster. So this is becoming a thing. It's becoming an important thing. It is seemingly a pretty big hassle to tune it, as I've found so far, but I'm not giving up. It's I really want to see how I can push my printer, but I think as you see new printers coming out, especially those that are promising higher speeds, it's quite possible that they will be based on Clipper. Like, we don't know, for example, Anker has the Anker M5 printer that's coming out that they've boasted prints like ridiculously high speeds, like 500 or even 1,000 millimeters a second, and and we don't know if that uses Clipper, but that's a distinct possibility. Certainly, the FL Sun uses it.
Is it open source?
Clipper, yes.
Okay, so other people can build off of that, and
exactly.
Integrate.
They already have config files for like 100 printers. Good. Popular printers and generic printers for examples of it. So yes, it's open source. You make your own. You actually have to compile your own firmware, unless you find someone who's already compiled the firmware for that system.
Fine.
And which I did, but you still have to mess with that printer config file on a regular basis. You have to be comfortable sending printer commands through the terminal, like G28 or whatever, to make it go home or whatever. But the idea is that you could get actually as good a print quality running faster. And you can also do things like fix problems with corners that are not quite rounded or not quite the right shape. There are other things that it uses to compensate for that. the real conceit of why Clipper works better than these other systems than the default system, which is usually Merlin does, is because it's running on a Pi. And by the way, it can run on a Pi 3 or a Pi 4. I'm running it on a 3. And it can do better calculations to figure out how to stop the ringing and stuff like that than the 8-bit or even 32-bit board motherboard that's in the printer. So it's taking the processing away from the printer and putting it into the Raspberry Pi. Of course, any printer that would come with it built in presumably has a better processor, not necessarily a Raspberry Pi, but another ARM processor that can handle Clipper. So
I have a question about it. So you've talked about setting it up on your printer and everything. What kind of success have you had from your test runs?
So what I have, and my daughter came and wanted to play with all the benchies that I built, all the little boats.
Why wouldn't she?
I want to borrow them. So I managed to get it to work to print things. At certain acceleration, which is like a low acceleration of 1,000. Yesterday I did a calibration cube at 2,000 acceleration. When I tried at 7,000, like the layers shifted and like I had a test print and like it was looking like like some kind of stairs on some kind of Aztec pyramid where it was like that, which is not how it's supposed to be because the layers are shifting. So it's and the printer sounds really violent. It's with a K. I should actually the place to go to learn about Clipper is clipper3d.org with a K. So,
I imagine it would get loud, like
it shakes the desk too. It's like
that's gonna make it harder to compensate.
Worrying something's gonna like pop out. So I'm trying to figure out the best. So like I can print with it at normal original speeds, but printing at the higher speeds is still a challenge. I haven't been able, when I tried to do the configuration print, what you're supposed to do is to adjust the input compensation, which is the thing that stops the ringing. You have to do a test print. And when you do the test print, I wish I had it here. My daughter wouldn't play with it in the living room, even though it's a totally failed print. You have to print this thing that looks like an X. That's like a corner wall, and it has like an X and a Y on it. And it shows you, and then you measure the rings on it. Mine like kind of layer shifted. It looks really bad, although my daughter picked it up and she's like, "Oh, toy telephone." That's what you thought it was, right? But it's so you're supposed to be able to do the calculations with that, then put it in the config file, then you'll get hopefully get a better test. But apparently what other people do is they buy an ADXL ADXL 345 accelerometer, which costs about $7 on Amazon. They solder the pins to it, and then they attach it to the Raspberry Pi, and there's a script you run on the Raspberry Pi, and you can get much better numbers to plug in from doing that.
Is it like this one? The
Yes.
little blue guy there?
Yes, exactly. So the main challenge that you have is that you have to mount it first on the hot end and then on the bed. So like mine, it's all enclosed, so I'm not sure how you would mount it. They say don't use tape, because if you use tape, it'll mess it up. And I have no idea how I'll screw this into the bed, but I have been messaging with a person who has set up his own like GitHub for my specific printer, which is the Neptune 3. There's probably much better support out there for like if you've got an Ender, like an Ender 3 Pro or one of those. I'm sure like everyone's figured out how to do exactly everything with that. This is yet another great example of why having a popular printer is important, rather than just a good printer. Like, so mine is not.
Can't beat good community support.
Mine is not unpopular, but if you have the most popular, this is one reason why Raspberry Pi is a success, right? It's like, sure, there's other SBCs out there, some of which have more powerful processors and other features, but they don't have the community and ecosystem support, and that's a killer. So in my case, I found someone who is kind of going through this process and knows a lot more than me, which is always good, and has some sample config files for my specific printer, the Neptune 3. But even there, I've been driving people crazy on Reddit and on the Clipper Discord, which exists. Some of them were nice enough to say, it sounds like you don't know what you're doing.
That's why you're looking for help.
So anyway, this person has sent me some 3D models I can use to sort of print to hold the accelerometer in place.
Oh, neat.
And then hopefully I can increase my speed. So is it worth it? Right now it hasn't been worth it, but it will be worth it if I can double or triple my speed. Now, some things that are going on in the marketplace, there's a new printer that was just on Kickstarter called the Bamboo 2 that is $1,500. And backers have just started receiving it. And supposedly that is ridiculous and can print like a Benchy in like 15 minutes. And I'm not sure if that uses Clipper or just other means. Maybe a part of it is also just the motors or less, vibrating. Is that a word? Faster 3D printing is definitely in the future. But if you already have a 3D printer and you want to try and make it faster, this would be a good thing to try and could cost you either nothing or next to nothing if you already have a Raspberry Pi.
And if you're a maker, you probably like to tinker anyway. So
it's
something fun to play with.
I can't resist.
Exactly.
I can't resist. I was happy just to get it to print normally because I've definitely had a few issues with stringing with it, stuff like that. It's
spaghetti.
It's definitely a big challenge, but I think a worthwhile challenge. The other thing I just wanted to briefly show here, and I'm going to show on my screen, is how to use Raspberry Pi to test a server that you are running. So one thing that I am doing right now, by the way, shout out to MT Putty, which is a great little UI for managing your Putty connections and putting them in tabs, and totally free. So I set up another Pi in my house, and one of the things I'm tasked with doing at work right now is doing web hosting service tests. So we've signed up for accounts on a bunch of different web hosting services, and we're trying to measure their performance. And one way to measure the performance of a server, whether it is a hosting service or a server in your house or a server at your job, a Raspberry Pi server, any kind of server running any type of software, is to try to figure out how many concurrent connections can this server handle? How fast is it to respond? Well, there's an app for that in Raspberry Pi. If you have installed Apache 2, which is an easy package to install, you would just do sudo apt-get install, right? Or just app install Apache 2, right? I already have it. So that installs the whole web server software on your Pi. You don't actually need to run a web server on the Pi to use this feature, but you need it to get this command. So it's called AB, and it's Apache Benchmark. This is AB. And there's a few different things you can do with it, but the main thing you want to do is N, the number of requests. Let's say we'll start with 1,000, and C, the number that are concurrent. So it's going to try to hit whatever URL I give it with 1,000 requests, 100 in packets of 100 at a time. Then you need to put in the name of the path of the server. Now this is a little key little thing here. Actually, I'll hit one of my test servers just to see. So future hosting test for SBS. That's what my hosting test. You need to put it, if you want the home page, you need to put a slash at the end of it, or it will say no path. You could put a particular URL, but you cannot just put the domain. So anyway, so you do this, and hit enter, you're going to see what happens. So it's going to tell you how many, see it's completing all these requests, right? And then it's going to give you a report. So let's see our report. All right, so our report says that our average time per request, mean across, I don't know what this means, mean across all concurrent requests was 14 milliseconds. I don't know what this here, these are all in milliseconds. So connection 681, processing, waiting, maybe it's 13.1372 milliseconds, which is 1.3 seconds. And this is the percentage of requests served within that particular time frame. So what does that tell you? Okay, I can do my server. Actually, maybe this is the most important number. My server can handle 70.62 requests per second, I think. What if I turn this up a notch? What if I tell it to do 10,000 requests at 1,000 a second? What's going to happen? Is it going to time out? If it times out, that tells me maybe that's too much. Maybe my server can't handle it, right? So, if it's taking a long time, that might be a bad sign. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if you're using a hosting service and testing a hosting service, they may interpret this as a DDoS attack and then block your IP. So
maybe message support first.
So one service that I tried to do this on, they blocked me, and I had to write to them and say, like, could you whitelist my whitelist me? But anyway, you can see this one's not going to look so good doing 1,000 requests at a time. So maybe a $70 a month hosting plan, maybe we should request expect it to handle 1,000 requests at a time. Or maybe we should. We'll see how slow they are. I mean, part of it is the weight of the page, but I think that the connect number tells you a lot, because that's like, okay, before I even do anything, SSL handshake failed. I overwhelmed the server, or it banned me. So hopefully it didn't ban me, so I can go in there again. But you get the okay, you get the drift. It did not like that. But that's what you have to do to try to see where you've sort of hit the limit, right? So like I said, you can do this on a server that you own and control, or you can do it on any server on the internet. And the server doesn't, even though it's an Apache test, the server doesn't have to be running Apache. That's just the maker of the test.
You needed that installed just to get to that command.
Yes, exactly. And to be honest, I don't think you absolutely have to have a Raspberry Pi to conduct this test. You probably could install this Apache software under Windows or Linux on another device. But it's convenient to have a device that's only doing this. And you could and if you wanted to, you could script it. So you had to do it different times. You have it, output the results to a text file. You could use the no-hup command in Linux.
And you can leave it totally headless. You can just have it just sitting off to the side. And
that's what I do.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing.
Yep.
I have a Raspberry Pi sitting next to my router, which is not in this room, and it's connected by Ethernet. Yeah, that's the other thing, is to make the tests most accurate. I strongly recommend that the Raspberry Pi that's doing the testing, get the best possible internet connection. So don't do it over wireless. Put your Raspberry Pi on Ethernet and put it next to the router.
Yeah.
Well, I was
So
going to use a mobile hotspot.
right, I mean, it will give you results, but they might not be the ideal results. So anyway, that's a tool in my toolbox of things that I'm using to do server testing. And if you run a server, whether it's one of your own or one that's hosted by elsewhere, that could be a helpful thing to have.
Very
Anyway,
cool.
I know Ash, you had some great projects that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so last week we celebrated our 100th episode, and part of that celebration was just recognizing all the makers that make the Pi community what it is. Raspberry Pi wouldn't be what it is without makers making cool stuff. So I had just a handful of neat projects that we've covered over the last month or so that I wanted to share with you guys. So the first one that I've got pulled up here, no thanks, Tom's Hardware, sorry, maybe another day, is this Raspberry Pi CNC drawing machine. And the reason that this is so cool is that, well, in my opinion, is that they built it not just with a Pi, but with recycled parts from a floppy drive and an old CD drive. So if you've been wondering what to do with your old floppy drive, besides use it for storing data or accessing data that you've stored, rather, you can build a tiny CNC machine and draw pictures on sticky notes, because that's, well, maybe it's not super useful and practical, but it's a really neat proof of concept. And just switch your pen out. You can get all these different colors. Have a lot of fun with it. It would be a fun project just to put together, because it involves a little bit of 3D printing. You can use Abrams Clipper add-on there for Octoprint to speed up your print process, right?
Yeah, I mean that's once you get it going, once you get it going, you get it going. So I hope by next week's show to have an update, because I just ordered the accelerometer and I got the 3D models. The other person who's working this sent me 3D prints that I can print to mount the accelerometer on this printer. So I'm going to, as soon as I get that, I'm going to test it and see if I can get to achieve new speeds.
Now, I know that Octoprint has a time-lapse feature. At least at one point they did. They've probably improved it, whoever's working on that add-on. But you should totally look into doing a time-lapse before and after of the same print and show us that to see how it...
Wouldn't it look equally fast, though, because they speed the time-lapse up?
You got to put a little clock in the corner.
Oh, okay.
Tell us. Yeah, that way we know.
There you go.
Cool. All right. Good point.
So the next one I wanted to share was this Raspberry Pi typewriter. Well, it's a regular old typewriter. It's a Brother, I believe, AX25. Yeah. And they've modified it with the Raspberry Pi to work as a Linux terminal. So instead of looking at a terminal window where things will pop up on the screen, it just types everything out for you on a piece of paper. I just thought that was really wicked cool. You type out your command and it types for you automatically back. That's just fun. That's insane. I think it's actually the second project like this that we've seen. There's another one. I don't think I have it in this list, but we covered it recently. You can definitely find it in our recent Raspberry Pi posts. But somebody was using a typewriter to print out like ASCII art using a Pi, and I thought that was pretty fun. This is a Raspberry Pi Apple hack, and it uses a Raspberry Pi, obviously, on the inside as its main computer, but the screen is an e-ink display. So you get the black and white screen, but you get the fun of an e-ink display. So it's going to look like it's always on whenever it loses power. And they also managed to use the original peripherals. So that keyboard and mouse is interfacing with the Pi inside, and you can use that to navigate your operating system. I thought that was pretty slick. Anything that uses hardware.
I'm trying to find the post, but somebody recently tweeted that they had taken an old laptop and converted it into a Raspberry Pi system. Like one of these laptops that was like the keys almost look like mechanical keys because it was so old from the 80s.
Oh, cool. All chunky.
Yeah.
Nice.
You should have a lot of room inside to add something like a Pi, so that would be cool.
Yeah.
It would be easier to play with, yeah. I wanted to talk about this tricorder too because, well, we love Star Trek, sue us. We love it. We actually had this maker, we covered this project they've made before. This is an upgrade. it doesn't look like a tricorder. They didn't make a tricorder replica, but rather they've made a device that they can use to scan the environment around them. And it's been upgraded to detect Starlink satellites. And if you're not familiar with Starlink, correct me if I'm wrong, that's a network of satellites that is intended to provide network access, to the internet around the world globally. And this is using an LMB module taken out of an old satellite dish, and it can show on the display little streaks where it's detecting the satellites as they move by. So tricorders, I know they wouldn't usually scan that far out into space on the show, but on Earth in present day, tricorders do that, and this is an example of it.
Yeah,
and it's portable.
It's a really nice project. That's really well made. It's in one of the Osprey cases as well. It's like completely waterproof, which is really good to see.
It's really cool. I want to play with it, don't you?
Yeah.
And then the last one I wanted to talk about here was, I think this project was actually made for by a college student as like a project they were doing for school. I might be wrong. You'll have to go to Tom's Hardware and read the article to find out. But it is using a Raspberry Pi with a camera module and artificial intelligence to scan your face. And if the face is recognized as approved, it will trigger a locking mechanism to unlock the door for you, which could be a security concern. But if you're sharp about it, you can use their little web app that they've created and get to it from your smartphone or tablet or whatever is connected to the network that can access the web server. But you can use that to choose, whose face is allowed. Maybe you want anybody to be let in. Maybe you just want to let Les inside so he can come deliver the banana pie you ordered and keep Abram out because his printer's not printing fast enough. Whatever. You get to decide who gets in and when on their little web app. So I like that it involved a lot of different mechanics to make it work. You've got the locking mechanism. You've got the artificial intelligence for the facial recognition. You've got the web app, and all of that comes together to make this a home security system. I thought that was just really cool because you can buy things like that, but why would you buy it if you could make it yourself? That's half the fun.
Yeah. I'm also thinking, could you hack it? So could you break in using just a printout of your face? So get a photograph of your face, nice high quality, print it out, put it up to the optical sensor.
Now there's a test. That would be fun. Or maybe if you had just a flat picture, and if you held it up, it might let you in. So that would be a good way to get through it if you could just go to somebody's Facebook and print out their profile picture and say, okay, I'm here. Maybe you could program it to look for movement so that it has to get multiple angles.
You could use a Kinect camera, the Microsoft Kinect from years ago. You can pick them up for dirt now. They're really cheap. They have an infrared camera as well as a standard optical camera, which scans your face to see that the shape of your face and how you are in 3D to interact with the 3D world. So you could easily put that together. That'd be fun. I think I've got one in the attic somewhere.
Now you got your work cut out for you.
Yep.
So lots of great projects. Next week, Ash will have the projects of the month to talk about, which are great. I will have an update on this Glipper stuff. Maybe I can even make it into a more comprehensive tutorial about how to do this. But there's some great documentation online for Clipper, so highly recommended. And we expect to have a special guest. But what's really special is that all of you who have come to watch and listen, either now or after the fact, for 101 episodes now. So thank you all to all of you. We are here every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. UK time, and we will see everybody next week. Bye.
Thanks, guys.